Hello, my name is Dr. Lucy, and I'm a clinical psychologist based in Melbourne, Australia. And this channel is a discussion of the overlap between the stories in the Quran and the teachings of Islam and modern day psychology. So, in this video, I wanted to talk about what we do when we're experiencing times of crisis and going through a really difficult time, going through something that feels like a disaster or a crisis is something that all of us will experience in our lives. And this is part of the human condition. As Allah says in Surah Al-Baqarah in verse 21, Allah says, "Do you think that you will enter paradise without being tested like those before you?" And that the people of the past were tested and shaken so violently in their tests that even the messenger and those that were with him called out, "When will the help of Allah come?" And Allah says, "Indeed, the help of Allah is near." So this is a beautiful verse to remind us that everyone is going to go through difficulties and there's a purpose to it. It's not just pointless suffering. It's not just because Allah is trying to make our lives difficult or to punish us in some way. That there's a purpose. There's a purpose and a reason for all of the difficulties and the trials that we experience in our life. That it's to prepare us, to give us tests to go through so that we can develop our resilience, develop our faith in God, to prepare us to go on to paradise. That this is not something that is just going to go through life easy, that this is something that tests and difficulties actually prepare us. And so there's a wisdom to it. So first and foremost, it's a reminder that everyone will go through difficulties. And there's a purpose to it. When we go through hard times, those are the times that we actually grow. We tend to not grow in terms of our faith or our strength and our resilience when times are easy. When times are easy, we tend to just coast on, going day by day. But when we are hit with a disaster, it actually puts us in a position where it shakes us. As Allah says, that they were shaken so violently. And when you are shaken, you need something to stabilize you. And what do we turn to stabilize us? We're stabilized through faith. And so when we go through difficulties, we sometimes need that reminder that this is good for me. This is not a punishment. This is not something to just make my life hard or to just show that everything is falling apart. No, it's actually to put us in a position where we are shaken, and to stabilize us, we have to reach out to faith. And Allah says that these people of the past, they went through difficulties to the point where they called out, "When will the help of Allah come?" And so this is an indication when someone's calling out, when is the help coming? That's an indication that they're in a state of desperation. So that's an indication that it feels like it's never ending. And when we're going through a period of difficulty, it can feel like we're in a deep, dark tunnel and we can't see the light at the other end. It can feel like, I know this is not going to go on forever, but I can't see when it's going to end. It feels like it's going to go on forever. And that can make a person despair. So when Allah says, "Indeed, the help of Allah is near," it's a reminder. Don't think Allah's forgotten you. Don't think that that's it. You're going through this disaster and the rest of your life is going to fall apart. It's to remind us, no, have faith beyond what you can see. When everything around you is dark and you can't see any way out, have faith beyond what you can see, because Allah's help is near and it's coming. Just hold on and don't give up. Don't despair, because that's what the shaitan wants from us. Shaitan wants us to despair. Shaitan wants us to give up. And that's the worst thing that we can do in a state of crisis, is to just give up and have no hope. Because when we do that, we become paralyzed and we become stuck in our situations. And it's so important that we keep putting one foot in front of the other. Because when Allah says Allah's help is near, we don't know in what form, in what way that something is going to shift for us. And it can be in the way that is so unexpected. But we have to do our part and hold on to faith and keep moving forward. It's essential that we don't become paralyzed by despair or just give up. Now, this concept of keeping on moving forward is something that we also see embedded in Quran. That we can't just, give up and just say, okay, everything's a disaster. because then things tend to get even worse. When we can hold on and even do the smallest things, often then bit by bit we start to see that things begin to shift. And this is no mistake that Allah has put it in the Quran that we have to do our part. We can't just sit back and just wait. Okay, I'm waiting for Allah's help. When is it going to come? I'm waiting here. No, we have to keep doing one thing after another. So the temptation can be to just go to bed, pull the covers over our head, and give up, and just be like, okay, I just want to shut the world out. And of course, we all feel like that at some point. And sometimes those small steps can just be getting out of bed, can just be getting on with our day, can just be holding onto faith. And even when we feel like we can't go on, that we say, no, I'm going to keep going on and trust that Allah's help is there. One of the stories in Quran that I think indicates the importance of us doing any step that we can to move forward is the story of Maryam alayhi salam. Now, in this story in the Quran, we know that she was pregnant and she was not married, and so she left the town to give birth to Isa alayhi salam, Prophet Jesus. And so she's in a state of distress because she doesn't know this. She doesn't know that she's giving birth to a prophet. She's in a state where she just feels like this is a disaster. And she knows that it's going to be a complete scandal in her town. And we can only imagine how distressed that she would have been. And in the Quran, it says that she called out and said, would that I had, the earth had swallowed me up before this, that I just disappeared. So we know, because we know her story, that she was actually blessed, that her difficulty was actually a source of blessing, that we would be talking about her story for hundreds of years all over the world, and that she was giving birth to a prophet. We can look at that now and think, oh, well, that was part of her journey. But at the time, she didn't know that. And so she just felt like, I just want to be wiped off the face of the earth. And after going through what would have been awful situation, would have been really distressing to give birth on her own, a young woman on her own with a baby, and then knowing that she's going to go back to her town and everybody's going to talk about her. And then Allah inspires her to shake the date palm tree, because He provides her with a special type of date which is called ratab, and it's a very sweet, juicy date, and it's to nourish her, to help to build her strength, to help her to recover. So what's interesting in this verse is Allah says, shake the date palm tree, and then He gives her the dates. So she had to make a step first, and then Allah gave her that relief. The interesting thing is, if you look at date palm trees, it's impossible to shake it. A human can't shake a date palm tree. They're huge. So it's interesting that she was told to do something which is actually physically impossible, to shake the date palm tree. And one of the explanations for why she was told to shake the date palm tree, even though that this is impossible, it's because that she had to do something, even if it was a symbolic act, even if it was something that didn't seem to have any effect, that she's going to shake this tree and it's not going to move. But it was an important step, and that Allah teaches us you have to do something, even if it seems to be pointless, even if you feel like this is not going to make any difference. I'm trying to do something and it's a pointless action. The point is that we have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. We have to show, no, I'm going to keep trying. And so when people around us say, oh, why are you bothering? Just give up. We need to know, no, I have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and know that Allah's going to bring something that's going to soothe us, that's going to help us. And it might not solve that problem immediately. It might be that it's just what we need to get through that day or through that moment, because Allah has a plan for us, that as we're going through that, He's not going to lift the difficulty straight away, because we may need to still be going through that hardship in order to develop ourselves, develop our strengths, develop our capabilities, develop our faith, to humble us. And so that whilst things might not be fixed immediately, or the difficulty might not be removed immediately, that each step we take, know that Allah is giving us fuel. Allah is giving us assistance. Allah is giving us help to move through that difficulty. And we know that Allah says, indeed, with hardship comes ease. So when we're going through difficulty, Allah also gives us the ease. Allah gives us the tools to help us get through it, because we could never get through these difficulties on our own. And to know that Allah is providing us with ways to keep moving through, to get through that hardship. So when we're in a period of crisis, it's important that we first remember that Allah's help is near. And we also do whatever we can. We don't just give up and just completely stop what we're doing. We keep moving forward in whatever help, in whatever way we can, in whatever small actions, and we keep on that path. We don't just give up, and know that Allah is going to bring us things that help us to get through that difficulty. Now, one of the things that is also really important when we're going through difficulty is that to find ways to ground us, to calm our nervous system down. Because when we're in a state of stress, we go into the fight-flight response, and that's when our nervous system kind of fires up, and that's when we're in a state of stress, and we have rapid heartbeat, we have rapid breathing, and in short periods of emergency, going into this state, this fight-flight response is actually very helpful. So when we have a short-term emergency that we need to react to, having a situation where heart rate increases and blood flows throughout our body and we're ready to act, that can be important in terms of an emergency. But when we're in states of crisis over a prolonged period and we're in that state of stress, it's really important that we find ways to calm us down, because we can't think clearly when we're in a constant state of prolonged stress. It's really important that we find ways to ground us, because when we're in a state of high levels of stress in our body and we're not finding ways to calm ourselves down, we often then don't think clearly. And I'm sure we've all experienced situations where we're going through difficulty and we're frustrated and we're really stressed out, and then we end up making silly mistakes or doing things because we're not paying attention, or because we can't think clearly. And often then we end up doing things that sometimes make things worse, or reacting in ways that make things worse. And one of the examples of this from the Quran is Prophet Yunus alayhi salam, when he was sent on his mission to give da'wah and call people to the message. And when they turned away from him, he became so angry that he left the town. He wasn't supposed to do that. So he did something out of being reactive. And then what happened was that there was a whole series of events that things just went from bad to worse. And ultimately he ended up being thrown over the ship and into the water and into the belly of a whale, where he ended up in a terrible situation where he was stuck in the belly of a big whale or a big fish. And it would have been just feeling like an absolute disaster. And so at that point, he called out. And from that story, we have wisdom from that as well, even that we have the beautiful dua of Yunus, that he was at that point where it would have just felt everything was hopeless. And he calls out, La ilaha illa ant, subhanaka, inni kuntu min adh-dhalimin. And what this says is, there is no God but you, glory be to you, indeed I was one of the wrongdoers. So meaning that he, in a way, he had to go through this because he then became so humbled and he realized that even though he was correct, he was frustrated, but because he kind of like lost his temper and he didn't remain patient, he ended up in this terrible situation. But then he needed to go through that because he needed to get to this point of being absolutely humbled. And then straight away after that, there then was a series of things that set in motion where Allah took him out of that situation and nourished him with fruit, and then he was able to get back on track. So what we learn from this is it's really important that we find ways to calm ourselves down and not be reactive, because when we're in a state of crisis, we're in a state of stress, our body is going to be fired up, our body is going to be in a stress state. And again, we can't think clearly when we're in that state. And this is a problem because when we're going through a crisis, what we need is to be able to calm ourselves down and think clearly. And we can do this in really simple ways. So by just doing some slow, deep breaths, there's lots of breathing techniques that you can find online. They calm our nervous system down. So Allah has created us in the most beautiful way. Allah has created us to be able to be in a state of calm and peace, but we need to sometimes just get out of our own way. We sometimes just need to stop and pause. And through the breath, which is amazing because we do this all the time, so Allah has created us to be able to have a mechanism to calm ourselves down. Slowing our breath down and sometimes taking 5 to 10 slow, deep breaths is enough to calm our mind and our body significantly, where we can actually think clearly. And if we do this throughout the day, it helps us to bring us back into a state of rest and recovery and healing, where we can actually think clearly. We can stop being reactive in our situation of crisis and our situation of difficulty. And we need that. We need to be able to approach things with a calm, rational mind. Now, when we have the 5 daily prayers, this is an ideal time for us to be able to stop, slow our breath down, connect to our bodies, allow ourselves to come into a state of peace and calm, and to then to be able to pray in a state of where we're using our whole body. And again, we should be connecting with our body through our breath, calming ourselves down. And it's amazing that Allah has given us this 5 times so that we have to stop. Now, what a lot of us do when we've got busy, crazy lives is that we tend to just be like, I've got to pray, quickly make wudu, get through the prayer and get on with what we need to do. Now, we need to remind ourselves this is a gift, and if we're rushing through it, we're not getting the benefits that we need, and particularly when we're in a time of difficulty. So when we take these 5 daily prayers, it's a reminder for us to, before we go to pray, even as we're making wudu, it's a time for us to start to do the deep breathing. And when I do this with clients in my clinic, when they're going through periods of stress, and I say, okay, we're going to stop, we're just going to fill the lungs up with air and hold it, and then we're going to slowly release it out. We're going to do that 5 times or 10 times. It doesn't take very long. People start to notice that, I can actually feel the stress relieving. I can actually feel myself feeling calmer. And I say, yes, because we're created to be in a state of calm, but we just need to stop and slow ourselves down and see that our body knows how to be in a state of peace and calm, but we just need to find that space and to be able to help it to get back to that state where we can be in a calm frame of mind. So reminding ourselves at those times of the day where we stop to pray, just take a moment to calm the self, and you'll find that you'll be able to think clearly, which helps us to be able to problem solve better. It helps us to be able to maybe also think, maybe I'm panicking about a situation and I need to remind ourselves that it's going to be okay. Now, the last reminder that I want to give is that whilst remembering that it's not going to go on forever, that when we look back in our life, that we've gotten through all of the difficult things that we've been through, and we've come out the other side every time by the will of Allah. We also need to reach out and connect and ask for help from people around us. Sometimes we keep our difficulties to ourselves because we sometimes don't want to share with people what we're going through. We don't want people to necessarily know our business or know what we're struggling with. And when we're in this state where we keep everything hidden, we just keep it to ourselves, either because we don't want people to know our business or because we're embarrassed about the situation, it isolates us. And again, we become vulnerable to the shaitan when we're isolated. When we start to actually open up about what we're going through, it actually provides support and connection. Now, it's important that if we're opening up and we're talking to people, that we find people that we can trust. We find people that we feel are going to be understanding, because the reality is not everybody is. So when we open up to people, it is important that it's people that we trust and feel safe with. But it is important that we reach out. So a lot of people say, I don't want to burden other people with my difficulties. But when we open up to others, this amazing thing happens where we feel a connection, because vulnerability comes through connection. And when we feel connected to others, we realize that we're not alone. And often what happens when we open up to someone that we trust and say, I'm going through this hard time, often what happens is that person feels more connected to us because we're being vulnerable and we're opening up something personal. But also the amazing thing happens is it gives other people permission to do the same. It makes other people feel like I'm not alone either. So in a sense, when we open up to others about our struggles, not only does it can provide us with a feeling connection with other people and allow people to support us, it also helps other people to realize that it's okay to open up, because everybody's going through something. You know, we live in this world where people, you know, post things on Instagram and show that they're living the most amazing life, but in reality we're all struggling in some way, and we all go through times that are really difficult. When we open up, when we be real and authentic and say, you know, I'm going through this hard time, it also shows other people, you know what, everybody goes through something. And we need to have that connection, because again, otherwise we're isolated in our crisis. And again, that's when we're vulnerable to the shaitan to whisper to us, to tell us negative thoughts, or to tell us everything is a disaster, give up, don't bother. But when we open up to other people, sometimes we start to realize, you know what, I'm not the only one who's going through this. And other people might have been through similar things. And when they share with us as well, which often happens when we start opening up, that we might share and then another person also shares that they went through something, we start to realize, you know what, you know, things might not be so bad, that if they got through it, I can get through this too. So that's my last point, to remember that not to stay isolated, to open up to others. And I believe that in our community, you know, it is important that we share with others what we're going through, because it helps us to feel more connected to one another and to Allah, inshallah. Thank you so much for listening. I appreciate, you know, your time and people taking the time to watch these videos. I have seen in the comments that people are asking for certain topics, and I am planning to get to those and address the different things that people would like to hear discussed. Thank you again. I wish you peace and love throughout your day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.